Every morning, a lioness showed up at a military base fence. No one knew why until a woman followed her deep into the desert and uncovered a secret that would silence an entire platoon. What she found didn't threaten lives, it shook them to their core. No one could remember when the lioness first showed up. One morning just before sunrise, there she was pacing just beyond the perimeter fence of Camp Briar Ridge, a joint military training base nestled along the jagged edge of the Sonoran Desert. At first, soldiers thought she was lost, maybe even sick. But when she returned the next morning, and the next after that, the murmurs turned to tension. She never roared, she never charged. She simply walked back and forth, always in the same spot near the north gate, her golden eyes fixed on the compound tail, flicking with a kind of eerie rhythm. Some called it haunting, others a warning. Nora Halley didn't believe in warnings, only patterns. As a wildlife rescue expert contracted to the base for environmental compliance, she was no stranger to big cats. She'd handled everything from bobcats in Arizona to leopards in Tanzania. But this was new. "She's not hunting," Nora said, peering through binoculars from the tower on the fourth morning. "She's waiting," Sergeant Dalton scoffed beside her. For what lunch? But Nora wasn't laughing. No, for someone. Word spread fast. The lioness had become a ghost story in broad daylight. The Fencewalker soldiers called her. Some joked nervously about her being a bad omen. Others cleaned their rifles a little more obsessively each night. Then came the seventh night, just after 1 a.m. The base floodlights snapped on, and the perimeter alarm shrieked. The lioness had approached the fence closer than ever before. She let out a low guttural growl that echoed across the yard like distant thunder. A handful of soldiers scrambled from the barracks, rifles at the ready. "Hold your fire," someone yelled, but too late. A young private's finger twitched. The rifle lifted. Nora sprinted, heart hammering. She reached him just in time, grabbing the barrel and jerking it downward. "What the hell are you doing?" the soldier cried, trembling. "She's not attacking," Nora snapped. "She's asking." That sentence hung in the desert air, longer than the wind. Even the lioness had gone still. The next morning, Nora stood in the base commander's office, her hands clenched. "Give me 3 days," she said. "Just 3. Let me figure out what she wants." Commander Rollins leaned back skeptical. "This is a military base, Ms. Halley, not a wildlife refuge. She keeps coming back to us. Maybe it's time we go to her." Nora chose 4 soldiers for the mission. Not the strongest, not the fastest, but the calmest. Among them was Sergeant Lucas Daniels, a quiet, broad-shouldered man with wary eyes and a permanent scowl. "I don't do well with lions," he told her flatly. "My dad was mauled by one in Kenya. Spent 6 months learning to walk again." Nora studied him. "Then you'll know better than anyone what to watch for." That afternoon, the team camped near the north gate, lying in wait as dawn turned the desert pink. Right on schedule, the lioness emerged from behind a cluster of brittle mesquites. She stopped just short of the fence, lifted her gaze, and stared directly at Nora. Nora rose, slowly gave a single nod, and the lioness turned, slipping back into the wilderness. "Let's go," Nora said. They followed at a distance. She didn't flee, she didn't rush. Every 50 yards, she glanced back as if making sure they were still behind her. The terrain grew harsher, loose rock, sun-split boulders, and scraggly brush that clawed at their legs. Daniels walked near the rear, scanning constantly, his jaw clenched tight. Half an hour and Corporal Simmons called out, "Ma'am, something here." Nora knelt beside him, a smear of blood along the side of a small creosote bush. Bright fresh. "Too low for an adult," she murmured. Daniels exhaled sharply. Cub Nora didn't answer. She didn't need to. They pressed on. The lioness was waiting on a high ridge ahead, silhouetted against the sky, like something out of an old legend. The wind stirred her fur, and then she moved again into a narrow canyon below. As the team descended, the shadows thickened. The air grew heavier, silent. No birds, no bugs, just breath and boots on dust. "We're being led," Daniel said quietly. "That's what this is." Nora nodded, and we're close. The lioness stopped once more, looking back, with something almost anxious in her posture. Then she vanished behind a rock face, out of sight. That night they made camp beneath an overhang, the rocks still radiating heat. Daniel stared into the fire, his voice barely above the crackling flames. "I was 6, he said. "We were in a preserve in Nairobi. The lion came out of nowhere. My mom screamed louder than I've ever heard anyone scream." Nora didn't interrupt. "He survived," Daniels added. "But I never forgot that sound, never trusted them again." Nora fed a stick into the fire. "Maybe tonight's the night to change that." He didn't reply. At first light, the lioness was gone. They searched, finding only wind-scattered paw prints and more of the faint blood smears now drying under the sun. "She didn't abandon us." Nora said, "She's waiting up ahead." Daniels crouched by a cluster of rocks. Or maybe this was the plan. Lead us into nowhere and disappear. But Nora turned toward the hills, eyes narrowing. The terrain dipped suddenly, and at the bottom, barely visible through the haze, was a narrow, fast-moving stream, and just beyond it, on the other side, the lioness stood once more. Still watching, still waiting. The lioness was still there. She stood motionless across the stream, tail flicking once, then still. The water between them wasn't wide, but it moved fast, rough, white-capped from monsoon rains 2 nights earlier. "Hell of a swim," Simmons muttered, eyeing the current. "She's not asking us to swim." Daniel said she swam it herself. They followed the edge upstream, hoping to find a narrow crossing. It took nearly an hour, dodging thorn bushes and loose gravel, before Nora found it, a flat section of rock, slick but shallow enough to wade through with care. "I'll go first," Daniel said. He didn't wait for approval. Within moments, the water surged around his legs. Twice it almost pulled him under, but with Nora and Simmons holding out a branch, he made it across. The rest followed, one by one. The lioness was gone again. Nora scanned the ridge. "She's close," as if on cue, a sound echoed from the craggy slope above them, a low, warbling cry. It wasn't from the lioness. Everyone froze. "You hear that?" Simmons whispered. It came again, high-pitched, muffled. "Weak. Up there?" Nora said, pointing toward a spill of loose boulders near the cliff wall. The rocks looked recently disturbed, as if rain and mud had caused a minor collapse. They scrambled up carefully. The sound grew louder, a small rasping whimper, then a paw, tiny orange shaking. "Oh my God," Daniels breathed. Nora dropped to her knees. The paw belonged to a lion cub wedged deep beneath a slab of sandstone. Another set of eyes blinked in the darkness behind it. "There are 2, she said. They worked quickly, hands bleeding, sweat stinging their eyes. They pried stone after stone, free one wrong move, and the rubble could shift again. It took them nearly half an hour. At last the cavity opened. The lioness was nowhere in sight, but inside the shallow cave lay 2 cubs. One was trembling alert, but still the other had dried blood on its hind leg and wouldn't move. Nora's voice softened. "They're dehydrated, hurt but alive." Daniel stared in disbelief. "She brought us here." For them, they carried the cubs gently to a flat patch of grass by the stream away from the rockfall. The injured one whimpered softly in Daniel's arms. Its fur was warm but matted, its breath shallow. One of the cubs wriggled free and tottered toward Daniels again, pressing its head into his cargo pants, refusing to move away. Daniels didn't speak. He didn't have to. Simmons raised an eyebrow. "Looks like someone made a friend." Daniels blinked hard. "He's just confused." Nora smiled faintly. "Or he remembers who lifted that rock." Then came the sound that stilled them all, a roar long and guttural from the ridge. The lioness appeared above them, silhouetted by the descending sun, her amber eyes locked on the cubs. She didn't move. "Everyone step back," Nora said quietly. "Let her come." They obeyed, retreating slowly across the stream. No one said a word. The lioness descended carefully, paws silent on the rock. When she reached the cubs, she lowered her head, nuzzled each one, gently licking their faces, inspecting their limbs with the carefulness of a surgeon. The injured one let out a soft cry. She licked his leg once. Twice Daniels watched from across the water, his breath hitched. "She's not wild," he said. "She's just a mother." Nora nodded, her voice thick. "Sometimes those are the fiercest of all." For several minutes, the lioness remained with her young. She didn't roar, she didn't run, she simply stayed. Then slowly she looked up directly at them and bowed her head, a single deliberate motion. It wasn't an animal gesture. It was something else, something ancient, almost human, Daniels whispered. She knows the sun had dipped below the cliffs by the time the lioness began nudging her cubs, one after the other, gently but with urgency. She turned toward the upper ridge, pausing to check that they were following. The cubs hobbled after her, the injured one limping, but determined. Nora exhaled slowly. She knows this place isn't safe. She's moving them. They stayed still, letting her disappear into the golden brush. No one spoke for a long while, then Daniels broke the silence. Why us? Nora turned toward him. She could have walked anywhere, but she came here to humans. After all the stories we tell ourselves about predators and danger and blood, she still trusted us enough to ask. Daniels looked down at his uniform, then to the stream. It doesn't make sense. Maybe it doesn't have to. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faintest sound, a dry rustle in the grass, the echo of small paws and the fading breath of something wild slipping back into the earth. Later that night around the campfire, Daniels sat quietly. His hands were scraped, his shirt torn, a faint smear of cub blood still on his sleeve. You know, he said to Nora, voice low, when I saw that cub crawl toward me, it reminded me of my son. He would have been 5 this year. Nora looked up sharply, caught off guard. Lost him in the first trimester, he added. Didn't talk about it much, couldn't. There was silence today. Daniel said, voice rough, something changed. That cub trusted me. I haven't felt needed like that in a long time. Nora didn't respond. She just reached over and gently placed her hand over his. The team returned to Camp Briar Ridge the following morning under a sky bruised purple with sunrise. No one cheered, no one saluted, but something had shifted in the air, as if the desert itself had softened. The lioness never came back, but for 3 days after their return, faint paw prints appeared at the edge of the north fence each morning. Not fresh, just present, like shadows remembering where the light used to fall. Nora submitted a full report to the Department of Wildlife and Conservation, accompanied by a formal request to restrict human activity in the ridge zone where the cubs were found. Her essay, later published in National Geographic, was titled, She Didn't Roar, She Reached Out. It sparked national headlines. Lioness leads soldiers to cubs. A desert rescue mission stuns America. Military base becomes ground zero for one of the most emotional animal encounters ever recorded. The lioness who knew trust donations flooded in to fund a new wildlife monitoring program near the base. Camera traps were set. Paths were closed, signs were posted, but one gesture more quiet than the rest moved the soldiers most. A metal plaque, small and unassuming, was installed on the inside of the north gate. It read, "Not everything that walks toward us is a threat. Sometimes it walks for someone else." No one took credit for the quote, but those who were there, they knew. Daniels left the base 6 months later, applied to work with an animal rescue group based out of New Mexico. He said he was done fighting what he didn't understand. Nora returned to the field. She never stopped writing or watching. Sometimes in her dreams, she'd see golden eyes through dust, hear a cub's cry in the wind, and when she woke, she smiled, not because it was over, but because she remembered, in the middle of a military base, under threat, under judgment, a lioness came not for war, but for mercy.